World War I started with the assassination of an archduke. The War of 1812 started over maritime trade and impressment. But in the summer of 1859, two of the greatest superpowers on the planet, the British Empire and the United States, almost plunged the world into a massive global war over a potato-stealing pig. Yes, a pig. Not gold, not territory, not freedom. A single, heavy-set hog with an uncontrollable craving for starches. This is the story of the Pig War of 1859, a 13-year military standoff where thousands of soldiers and 5 warships faced off on a tiny island, and the only actual casualty was the pig. To understand how a farm animal almost caused an international disaster, we have to go back to 1846. The United States and Great Britain were trying to draw a permanent border between the U.S. and British Canada in the Pacific Northwest. They agreed on the 49th parallel, which was nice and simple on land, but then they hit the ocean around Vancouver Island, and things got murky. The Oregon Treaty stated that the border would follow the middle of the channel which separates the continent from Vancouver's island. Here's the problem. There wasn't just one channel. There were 2 major channels, Haro Strait to the west and Rosario Strait to the east. And right smack in the middle of these 2 channels sat a 55-square-mile piece of rock called San Juan Island. Naturally, both countries looked at the vague treaty, looked at San Juan Island, and said, "Yep, that's definitely ours." For a while, nobody really cared. The island was mostly inhabited by local indigenous tribes and a lot of wild sheep. But by the late 1850s, both powers decided to stake their claim in the most passive-aggressive way possible, by moving in. First came the British. The Hudson's Bay Company established a massive sheep ranch on the southern tip of the island to solidify British presence. To run it, they sent Charles Griffin, a very proper, monocle-wearing British ranch manager who took his job extremely seriously. Then came the Americans. Around 25 American squatters arrived on the island, claiming they had every right to settle there under U.S. homestead laws. Among them was Lyman Cutlar, a quick-tempered American farmer who just wanted to build a cabin and grow a nice crop of potatoes. So now you have British sheep farmers and American squatters living on the exact same island, both convinced the other side is illegally trespassing. Oh, and Charles Griffin brought along one extra resident, a prized black Berkshire hog. This pig was giant, mischievous, and possessed an uncanny, magnetic attraction to Lyman Cutler's potato patch. It was only a matter of time before these neighbors collided. On June 15, 1859, the inevitable happened. Lyman Cutler walked out onto his porch, looked over at his garden, and saw the British pig happily wallowing in his soil, devouring his hard-earned potatoes for the 3rd time that week. Cutler snapped. He ran inside, grabbed his rifle, marched out to the garden, and shot the pig dead. Almost immediately, Cutler felt a wave of regret. He didn't want an international incident. He was just mad about his potatoes. So, like a responsible neighbor, he walked over to Charles Griffin's ranch to apologize and settle things man-to-man. Cutler offered Griffin $10 to cover the cost of the pig, which was a decent chunk of money in 1859. Griffin was furious. He rejected the $10 and demanded $100, equivalent to over $3,000 today. Cutler shouted, "$10 is fair. Besides, it was eating my potatoes." Griffin replied, "Rubbish. It is up to you to keep your potatoes out of my pig." Cutler told Griffin to take a hike, and Griffin threatened to have Cutler arrested by British authorities and thrown in jail. Terrified of being hauled off to a British prison, Cutler ran to the nearest American military outpost on the mainland and asked for protection. Enter Captain George Pickett. Yes, that George Pickett who would later become famous for leading the disastrous Pickett's Charge during the American Civil War. Pickett was a bombastic, glory-seeking officer who never saw a minor dispute he couldn't dramatically overcomplicate. Pickett jumped at the chance to flex American muscle. He dispatched 66 U.S. soldiers to San Juan Island, landed on the shore, and posted a giant notice claiming the island was now under sole U.S. jurisdiction. When James Douglas, the British governor of Vancouver Island, saw 66 American soldiers occupying what he believed was British soil, he lost his mind. He ordered 3 warships armed with 62 heavy cannons to sail directly to San Juan Island and kick the Americans off. Suddenly, a petty argument between two farmers over a dead pig had turned into an amphibious military invasion. By August 1859, the situation was completely out of control. Pickett's 66 soldiers were now entrenched on the beach. Surrounding the island were 5 British warships, carrying over 2,000 men and 167 heavy guns. Governor Douglas gave a direct order to the commander of the British fleet, Rear Admiral Robert Baines: land the Marines and crush the Americans. This was the moment. The entire fate of British-American relations hung in the balance. And Admiral Baines took a long look at the situation, looked at the official reports, and essentially said, "Are you insane?" Baines flatly refused the governor's order. He famously remarked that he would not involve two great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. Because neither side wanted to be the one to start an actual war, strict orders were issued to both forces. Do not fire unless fired upon. What followed was one of the weirdest military standoffs in history. Hundreds of soldiers stood on the beach, yelling creative insults across the line. Eventually, word of the standoff reached Washington, D.C. and London via mail ship. When U.S. President James Buchanan and the British cabinet realized that their nations were on the brink of war over a hog, both governments had the exact same reaction: complete horror. President Buchanan immediately dispatched General Winfield Scott, a legendary diplomatic negotiator, to fix the mess. Scott sat down with the British and worked out a peaceful compromise. Both sides would scale down their forces. The Americans would keep a small garrison of 100 men on the south end of the island, and the British would keep 100 men on the north end. They maintained this joint military occupation for 13 years. During that time, the American and British soldiers actually became great friends. They held joint 4th of July parties, celebrated Queen Victoria's birthday together, and hosted regular athletic competitions. Finally, in 1872, Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany arbitrated the border and awarded San Juan Island to the United States. The Pig War officially ended after 13 years of occupation. Millions of dollars were spent. 2 superpowers deployed thousands of troops, and in the end, the only casualty in the entire war was Lyman Cutler's neighbor's pig. If you enjoyed this weird piece of history, hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you have paid $100 for that pig?